Monotype.
Welcome to Creative Characters from Monotype, a show where we meet the people at the intersection of type and everyday life. I'm your host, Graham, and I'm here today with my co-host, Carl. Hello, Carl.
Hi, Graham. Welcome back to Creative Characters. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Great. We're very excited to have you back on for what is now your second episode. Last time you were on the show, we spoke with Justin Burns, and this week you have another guest that you are equally excited to introduce. So why don't you tell us who you're speaking with today?
I'm really delighted to be joined in person in this episode by the typographic artist Vic Lee. Now, Vic's someone I've known for a long, long time, maybe more than 20 years, so we know each other very well, and we decided to meet at the London studio to talk in person. You know, it felt like a good way to connect again after not seeing each other for a year or two. And Vic's journey from being a graphic designer like myself to a typographic artist is a really interesting story. And he's refreshingly honest in his approach as well. So, you hear everything, warts and all, from his upbringing all the way through to some of the struggles he's had. And I think for any creative listening in, this is a really inspiring story to hear.
Yeah, I think one of the themes that comes up time and time again on this show is the experience of going through, creative peaks and valleys, but also pushing yourself into new disciplines, new mediums, stepping outside of the proverbial comfort zone. And that just kind of seems to be Vic's story. Right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's working on some sort of massive portrait project now, isn't he?
Yeah, so he's traditionally well known for creating these large-scale typographic murals. And just for his own personal development, he's also kind of extended his repertoire of styles into other avenues. And he's been creating these amazing travel diaries for the past few years, which have just been personal exercises for himself to document where he's been visiting. And they're kind of storytelling exercises of the people he meets and the experiences he has. And this project he's working on currently, which is an ambitious project to create 365 portraits of people and their stories over the course of a year, is an extension of that.
And he speaks too about sort of finding new directions, quote unquote, later in life. He had a post a few weeks ago about sort of hitting an inflection point in his own career when he was about 42 and talking about, starting over, or not so much starting over as finding new directions and whatnot. And I found it quite inspiring because I was just reading it and thinking to myself, like, well, I'm 42, like, should I be? But I think it's great when people can really take you inside the journey of, a creative's progression through life as they explore new things and sort of reinvent themselves regardless of where they are in their career or in their age.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he's refreshingly honest. He kind of very open about his experience and happy to share for everyone's benefit. I think, again, anyone listening to this podcast will, whether young or old, will learn something new from his experience.
Great. Well, I'll turn it over to you and Vic, and to our listeners, hope you enjoy this conversation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Graham Sturt, and I'm thrilled to be speaking today with the artist Vic Lee. Welcome, Vic.
Thank you, Graham. It's good to be at Monotype Studio.
For the benefit of those unfamiliar with you and your work, please give a short introduction about yourself.
Okay, I guess I give myself many titles: artist, illustrator, map maker, typographer, loosely, and general ragamuffin, I suppose.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on that. So we've known each other for more than 20 years, actually. We met as graphic designers working in studios in London. We developed a good friendship.
I was kind of racking my brain as the first time that I met you. And I remember, I'm not going to mention the name of the agency, but it was back in the day. And I think you were working on a telephone directory. You were designing a telephone directory, probably the most insanely boring project you could ever do. And that's the first time I met you. And I thought, if this guy's being creative with a telephone directory, then yeah, I'm probably going to end up being friends with him for a long time.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I mean, it taught me rigor and and the formality of typography.
And luckily, you don't get them anymore, so you don't have to do them anymore, which is a fortunate thing.
Over the course of this conversation today, I'd love to chat about your own brand of creativity, how you find inspiration, your passion for typography, and ultimately your enduring love of Northern Soul. With you being a man of many words, I've got a feeling we'll meander about a bit in the conversation, so hold on tight, listeners. You described just then some of the kind of the ways you describe yourself as an artist, as a storyteller, an author, map maker, typographer, and ragamuffin. So we'll talk about the first 5 talents soon. But first, I wanted to dive into Vic Lee, the ragamuffin.
Okay. First of all, I have known Graham for over 2 decades now, which is amazing. The one thing I should say to the listeners out there, it's great because we both still got our hair, which is incredible under the circumstances of working in design for so long as well. So I guess my personality of ragamuffin, it's been developed as I've become an artist. I was talking to Graham a bit about this before we started this interview and was kind of talking about my childhood. My childhood is basically born and raised on a council estate. I was an atypically bullied kid because of the way I looked. I had ginger hair, skinny, incredibly shy, broken spectacles. So I was an atypical Hollywood bully type victim. And I was incredibly shy. So I've worked on that over the past X amount of years. I won't say how many, but I've now developed, I guess, Vic Lee, the artist, over the past 14 years. And I've become more confident with who I am. And I think that's through the work that I do, but also the clients that I've worked with and how people see me now.
Because we've known each other for a long time, I know a bit about that background and I'm intrigued by it. So, I would never imagine that you were a shy, retiring kid who got bullied, because even if I know a little bit about your background, you were a scooter boy in the past. Mm-hmm. You were hanging out at World's End outside the Vivienne Westwood shop in the 80s.
Yeah.
You were going to Shoom, the Danny Rampling Club in the Acid House era. That doesn't really kind of relate to the shy, skinny, ginger, bullied boy.
No.
How did this transformation come about then?
I think that was a lot to do with that sort of time in my life. The scootering days, I think I became part of a group. I was in a scooter club called Switchbacks in Berkshire. And I used to custom paint scooters when I was 15, 16. So my friends would just come up and say, "Can you paint my scooter?" I had no skills. I had no, design principles. I didn't even know what a designer was until I was about 28. I was doing some research a few months ago for a talk, and I realized that the turning point for me in the introduction of design was when I saw Why Not Associates Next catalogues that they used to do in 1989, 1990. I didn't know what a designer was, but I used to get the Next catalogues, not for the clothes, no disrespect, Next, but I used to rip all the pages out and just keep all the ones that Why Not Associate had done. I kept them for years and years, but I was still kind of quite a shy kid. I just needed to be part of a group, and I needed to be, I guess, accepted for who I was. And I was as a scooter boy, and then obviously going into clubbing days, Shoom, and that sort of thing as well. If you go onto Getty Images, actually, and you type in 1990s models, Vivienne Westwood, I do come up actually on Getty Images, which is...
So probably not the first hit.
No, I am actually one of the first hits, unfortunately. You probably wouldn't recognize me, though, so that's fine.
It's interesting you mention about this inspiration in terms of something as kind of straightforward as a Next catalogue, but it didn't kind of directly put you into the design industry, did it? You also kind of spent some time working on ships.
Yes, I was a postman for a couple of years. It was in my clubbing days. So Saturdays I would often phone in sick because I'd have gone out on a Friday night. So I lasted for a couple of years as a postman. And then I was a painter and decorator. I restored billiard tables. I was a fine art printer. I did loads of things. I didn't actually go to university till I was 27. The reason why I went to university to study graphic design was because I thought I needed to get a job. I needed to get a career under my belt. Graphic design seemed to be the most logical thing because I began to understand and love design and art more, I guess.
Have you always kind of felt creative, or have you had kind of a flair for drawing, that kind of thing that transformed into design?
Yes. My dad was an engineer. He was a lathe turner back in the day, and he would make stuff in between doing his work and bring it home. So we had a good shed full of tools, and my dad used to let me play in the shed with different materials. So I used to make stuff. I learned how to sew. I watched my dad, because my mum passed away when I was 3 as well. My dad raised me and my sister. So I used to watch him cook and mend things. Because we didn't have much money, it was a case of doing as much as you could. So art, for me, because I was being bullied, art became my escape. And I still have all the original drawings that I did when I was 7, 8, 9, up to the age of, I think, 18.
Wow. So you went to university, you made this decision to study design that morphed into a career as a graphic designer. Tell me a little bit about the transformation from graphic designer to soloist Vic Lee.
Okay.
A change of direction, essentially.
Yeah, massively. Okay, the true story is this. I got to the age of 42 and I remember sitting in a design studio. I was freelance, working on a project. I won't say who it was for, but the account director was behind me with the creative director, basically telling me to make the blue a little bit bluer and the type maybe a little bit bigger. And they walked away and I thought, I can't do this when I'm 50. No disrespect to any 50-year-old graphic designers out there. I'm sure you're exceptional. But I didn't know what to do. And that was the moment when I realized I needed to do something else, but I didn't know what it was. The situation offered me a way out when I was freelancing for a certain agency. I'd won them loads of clients. I was pretty much creative director for this company as a freelancer, even though I was still a designer. So we'd won loads of projects for Colgate and Coca-Cola. It got to Christmas Eve and we were having drinks in the office and they said, thanks for all your help, Vic, but we don't need you next year. And that was a kick up the arse for me. So I took 3 months off and I lived in East Dulwich at the time. So I remember sitting in a little cafe, used to be Green and Blues in East Dulwich, and thinking how amazing it would be to draw this street, to illustrate it, and do a little bit of history. So that's what I did. So that's when I launched my London Areas prints.
Yeah, and I remember those clearly. I think the first one you did, correct me if I'm wrong, was Lordship Lane.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I should say Lordship Lane in East Dulwich, not in Tottenham.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that piece of work was kind of pivotal for you.
Yeah.
Essentially, it gave you a direction, or it gave you
a purpose. Yeah, I think it gave me a purpose. I drew this piece of work and I got a friend to screen print them. I put them up on a local forum, the East Dulwich Forum. I just put them up as limited edition prints of Lordship Lane in East Dulwich. I think they were £35 at the time. And I just thought, if I sell 10, then cool, that's 350 quid. I'm happy with that. As soon as I put them on the forum, my email just lit up. It was crazy. It was pinging up every second. So for the next 2 or 3 weekends, I was driving around in my little Renault Clio with rolled up prints in the back of the car, and I was delivering these prints to people by hand, and they were giving me £35 cash. I kind of like to call myself a South London dealer, but an art dealer, not the other dealer. So I had a glove box for 3 weekends stuffed with cash, which was crazy. And that for me was a bit of an eye-opener. I still worked in graphic design, but I could definitely see there was a light at the end of the tunnel.
And the success of this series, I assume, enabled you to actually facilitate the full-time move out of graphic design. Was that scary?
Yeah, madly, Graham. It was crazy. I knew I was onto something. I stretched out across London, so I started doing more areas. I was single at the time, so I was working full-time as a graphic designer, freelance. Then I was illustrating during the evenings, and then at the end of the week, I would drive up to East London and I would screen print. And at the weekends, I would do shows for like Saturday and Sunday. So I was probably doing 70, 80-hour weeks. I couldn't do that now. My wife wouldn't be too happy about that. Actually, let me rephrase that. She probably would be quite happy about that. So yeah, I was doing long hours, but I could see there was something. And it got to a stage where I sat down, and this is something no one ever does. If you sit down and you work out what your outgoings are, like genuinely work out what your outgoings are a month, you realize that there is possibilities to do something else. And that's what I did. I realized I didn't need that much. I needed an amount of money because I had a mortgage, but it wasn't the amount of money that I was working towards, if you understand what I mean. I realized that I needed to live to my means, and suddenly it was about 15 grand a year. And I thought, if I can live on 15 grand a year, if I can sell £15,000 worth of prints, then I can set myself free. And that was a turning point for me. But yeah, blimey, I was pooping myself, that's for sure.
Well,
not literally.
Well, hopefully not. But in terms of that London Areas Editions series, it became quite a big series in the end, didn't it? You covered a number of areas of London, but then you also branched out into doing landmarks. For instance, I've got prints of Battersea Power Station and the Tate Modern. Did you ever consider taking this as an idea that you might document neighbourhoods in other countries, for instance?
Yes. The plan was New York. It was supposed to be a thing that was going to open me up to the whole world, and I was going to become this world famous street guy. But then I started getting commissions, and that put a full stop on everything. It was the first commission I got was from the Zeta Hotel Group. So Mark Sainsbury's, who was running the Zeta Hotel Group at the time, he bought a print and they commissioned me to do a picture of the townhouse, Zeta townhouse. And as soon as that happened, the commissions just started sort of coming through the door. So I never actually got back to New York, unfortunately. But, you know, I'm never going to say never, that's for sure.
I think it'd be a really good idea if you ever find the time. So you mentioned the commissions with the Zeta being the first. That kind of led you into the world of murals, I think. Is that correct to say that? I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd love to hear how London Areas took you into another direction with your work, into the world of mural art.
Mural art. So the London Areas was big for me. I ended up having sold out editions. Pretty much all of the editions have sold out now. One of our friends was doing an opening night in Dalston, actually literally just around the corner from here. So she was doing an opening night and she said, would you like to come and draw on my wall outside? It was a summer with chalk, and the next day the council will come along and wash it off. So I had a few beers, and I drew all over the wall in chalk, and someone who was at the opening night saw it and said, a friend of mine's an architect and she's doing these offices up in Somerset House. They're looking for an artist to come and paint on the walls. Would you be interested? So I said, yes, of course. I'd never done anything like that before. So I was put into this situation where I had this grade 1 listed building, all these walls to paint, and no skills. But that was the moment that I fell in love with painting murals. I remember standing in front of the wall, the first wall, for about 30 minutes while all the staff were walking around me. And I was thinking, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. But as soon as the pen hit the wall, it was almost that eureka moment. And I never looked back.
I've witnessed you doing these murals, or a couple of them at least, and they're on big expanses of wall.
Yeah,
you do everything by hand. It's all
madness.
Pen, ink on wall.
Yes.
There's no cheating there. And I wanted to ask you particularly about the mural art work. It's so labor intensive. I've witnessed you doing at least one mural on a 3.5 meter length of wall. It's literally you and a pen and time. And it must be so heavy on your body to kind of do these things. I mean, have you suffered from RSI or any injuries because of these things?
Yes, I think my entire body's been scanned. I've had MRIs, brain x-rays, neck x-rays. I was told that I had arthritis of the knee, which I didn't, back injuries, arm injuries, tennis elbow, golfer's elbow. I've had everything, really. Someone introduced me to a thing called TMS, which is tension myositis syndrome. I'm not going to explain what it is. Go and look it up. It's to do with your emotional state and your brain reprogramming pain. And that's really helped me understand my body a little bit more. Doing a mural, I think the biggest one I've done to date is 40 meters. And it's a bit like doing 8 hours of yoga a day. That's the way I look at it. I'm like a contortionist. And I do go home after a day and just fall to pieces when I get home, and then start again the next day.
I'd love to hear more about your process in creating murals.
Yeah, my murals are text heavy. They're typographically heavy. It's all about storytelling. I'm at an age and a stage where I do care about stuff, but I care maybe a little bit less. So I have been in meetings with clients who are big brands, big agencies, big clients. I've sat down at a table and we've discussed the project, and I will turn around and say, look, what you want me to say on the wall is very dry. It's very, can I put it honestly, boring. And you don't really want your mantra on the wall. You want a little bit of humanity. And I do get a lot of clients that look at me with absolute shock, but then they do understand the process that I go through is rewording what they say with a more playful side. So I humanize what they say, what they want to say. So it becomes something that people can actually engage with, not just staff, but visitors as well. And it's also really important for me. I've worked with the University of Kent on 2 murals, the Alan Turing mural and Virginia Woolf mural, which I'm very proud of. And I had to do so much research for that. But because it was in a university campus and students would be seeing it on a daily basis, I had to be really cautious about what I was saying and the tone of voice. But I also needed to talk truthfully about these characters, from their bipolar depression to suicide to, their sexuality. So for me, it's really important to be able to talk about everything that doesn't offend anybody, but helps people understand a bit better. And that could be a playful side, but also a serious side as well.
And you touched on there about your work being heavily typographic based. And I'm really interested to kind of dig into that a little bit in respect to the kind of custom typefaces that you're creating for those pieces. Some of them, they look familiar. They look like kind of like they're based on familiar typefaces, but they have the Vic Lee filter, if you like, that makes them characterful and unique as well. And they're different all the time, to a certain degree, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to hear more about that. And I'd also love to hear if you have any kind of, interest in maybe even kind of developing Vic Lee typefaces, for instance, for commercial releases.
Gosh, that would be mad, wouldn't it? I remember doing a talk. I'll give you a story. I did a talk in Germany a few years ago, and the lady that was on before me was a web designer, developer. So she came on stage and she correctly said, when using fonts on websites, and this is what I was taught as well in design, that you should never use more than 2 or 3 different typefaces and also weights. So she came on stage. She said, remember, you shouldn't use more than 3 typefaces maximum, and you should also be careful about the weights that you use because it jars with the design and legibility of the work. And then I came on stage and I just said, ignore everything that lady's just said. This has probably got about 80 typefaces in, and a lot of it is just crazy stuff. She saw the funny side, as did everybody else. But yeah, I mean, my love of typography, I guess, comes from storytelling. The way I look at it is, we take typography for granted because we see it every day. We see it on everything, advertising, but everything you see, your phone, there's typography everywhere. So we take it for granted. But for me, typography it's a personality. So when I do a mural, the words that I use, I give a personality to. So you might see a certain typeface and say, oh, I recognize that. But there'll be like swirls and curls and ligatures and loads of stuff going on because I feel like it needs to have its own personal voice. And it's more important than just a word. It's everything that we communicate with.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. When I look at your work, I think the typography is helping to characterize the content. So your choice of styles of typefaces reflect the tonality of the copy as well. And do you kind of go into these murals or typographic pieces with styles in mind, or do they kind of flow with the content?
It kind of flows with the content. Again, I mean, I'm one of these people that I tend to get away with a lot. I don't know how. If I present a sketch to a client, it'll be, I call them toilet sketches, and it's a personal thing. They're not really drawn on the toilet, but I call them toilet sketches because they're really quick sketches. And I'll present to a client and I'll say, look, it's going to look a little bit like this, but it's not really, because it's going to be completely different by the time it's finished. But you have to trust me. And that sounds mad. Working in design, to be able to say that to a client is nuts. But for some reason, my clients seem to agree and they okay it and they leave me to it. I think that's a magical thing, because the words, the type, it just develops as I ink. I would probably say that the balance is 20% is designed, 80% is just freestyled on the days that I paint. Crazy.
And yeah, one thing I wanted to also talk about, we talked about murals and we talked about prints, but your work has kind of touched so many different kind of areas now. You've inked bikes, you've inked cars, you've inked watches, guitars, whiskies, skateboards, and even at one point a human scalp.
Yes, good old Mark Denton.
And so besides the human scalp, which I'm sure was interesting and probably quite challenging, what's been the most unusual or challenging commission you've taken on?
You know, I don't have a specific, because every project, this is going to sound really lame, every project is different. It's not like I just sit on a computer and work something out and then it gets printed. It could be a 40-meter mural that I did for UK TV, inking Mark Denton's head, painting on a car. They're all completely different. And I think that's what I love. It's what I love about my life. I spoke to my accountant this week and we were talking about earnings and stuff. And he said, so you must know what you're going to earn like within the next sort of 6 months. And I was like, Daniel, I said, I have no idea what I'm doing tomorrow or this afternoon. So I could never tell you what I'm going to be doing in 6 months. I said, my life doesn't work like that. It's literally a phone call away from another project. And I love it because I'm just kind of floating around like a magic carpet.
I wanted to also talk about, this is interesting, talking to the accountant about planning, and maybe he doesn't understand that or he finds it fascinating. But one thing I find about your way of working is, as an artist, you work without an agent. And how is that? Probably means you're wearing lots of hats. You're the new business guy, you're the creator of the work, you're the accountant, the bookkeeper, and everything in between.
I'm everything, and I'm vastly underpaid if I'm everything. I'll be honest with you. I'm probably about 30 different roles in one person. Yeah, I do everything. I do account handling, chasing, quotes, dealing with clients. A lot of the projects will be dealing with contractors on building sites. And I'm there just doing everything, as well as the inking, the designing, typography, copywriting. I'm a control freak. I don't rely on anyone. I think from my background as a child, I've kind of learned to rely on myself, and I kind of find it hard to let go and let someone else come along and take over my life, because I feel like they're not going to do a good enough job, but they probably do it better, to be honest. I don't know.
Well, I think you're doing a very good job.
Thanks.
The last time we caught up really for a good chat was in December 2020, soon after you'd published your glorious book, The Corona Diaries.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you can talk a bit about this fabulous creative response to the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, that was an accident. It was a happy accident. So March 11th was me and my wife's anniversary, the date we met. It was also our friend's birthday. So I remember going, and it was also the day that the pandemic was announced as a pandemic. So 3 things to celebrate. Great. We were out with friends for breakfast and chatting to my friends who have children. And they were telling me that they, as we did in that time, all the adults thought it was a flu and it wasn't anything too serious. But their children were quite affected by it because they were reading about it. And I realized that the children were maybe more aware of what was going on than the adults were. So when I travel, when I go away on holiday, I do these things called illustrated diaries. I realized that as I was getting older, people would often come to us and say, "Oh, where did you go on this holiday? Where did you visit?" And I can never remember. I'd go, "Oh, it's a park, it's here, it's there," but I can't remember the area. So I decided to do these illustrated diaries. So I draw every day where I am, who I'm seeing, how much everything costs, the places that I go to. They're illustrations with typography. It's all complete. I've been doing them for about 12 years now. So I put this little video up on YouTube. It's only about 3 or 4 minutes. It might still be up, I'm not sure. And it's to encourage children and adults alike to sit down and illustrate their days, what's happening and how they're dealing with it. Because for me, illustration is a very calming thing. And handwriting typography is also, it slows the brain down, and it makes you digest things in a much more relatable way. So I put this video up and I didn't think anything of it. And then I thought, well, if I put this video up, I should probably do one myself. So that's what I started doing. I started illustrating this diary of a day-to-day, how we were living, and then going into news reports. And I put it up on LinkedIn, and I just said, "Oh, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing this illustrated diary to help me understand what's going on." And this little video that I put up blew up, and I had messages from thousands of people all over the world saying, "You have to publish this because this is where we are. This is what's happening to us." And that's pretty much like asking your 13-year-old child to publish their diary, because it was quite personal. But I had nothing else on because all my work had gone. All the projects would just stopped. So I went full on doing this Corona diary, illustrating every day, reading the news, delving into stories. And it just sort of blew up, really. And I ended up self-publishing and funding. I released 2,500 copies, which sold out within 6 weeks of launch all around the world. And this book ended up winning loads of awards as well, all over the world. I mean, it's crazy. The book was actually featured in school curriculums in the US, Europe, and the UK as well, to get kids to start their own stories and write their own diaries. It was crazy. It was the best thing I ever did.
And you ended up creating a second edition of it as well. I think it's an incredible body of work, particularly to kind of capture that moment in time.
Yeah.
And what's the kind of the response that you've had from doing this?
Oh, it's been amazing. The messages, personal messages I've got from people. Honestly, it's there's been a few tears in our household. The people writing to me saying, I lost my granddad, I lost my uncle, my brother, my sister, my mother, and I couldn't say goodbye. And I completely switched off from what was happening. And then I bought your book, and it made sense because I'd kind of blocked out everything. It was crazy because it was not meant to be anything more than just an illustrated diary, but it ended up being this huge thing. I'm still getting messages this week from people saying I bought your diary and I've gone back to it and I'm rereading it again because there's so much I've forgotten. And there's a lot of funny stuff in it as well as the bad stuff. It's quite political because of everything that was going on, but it covers everything from around the world. It was definitely the best thing that I've ever done.
And I know for a fact that your work's taken you all over the world as commissions for murals, working with clients like Virgin Atlantic, British Airways, for instance. Tell us a little bit about some of the highs and lows of this international jet-setting lifestyle.
I wish it was international. It is good. It's good fun. I'm one of these people. I'm a paranoid. I'm a paranoid person. Give you an example. If me and my wife are going on holiday, I'd like to get to the airport 4 hours before our flight, whereas my wife would prefer to get an Uber to the bottom of the plane. So that's how paranoid I am. I remember going to Thailand once and I was traveling with some friends and my suitcase got lost and I never got my clothes for about a week. My friend, Ian, I ended up wearing his clothes and Ian's about 2 sizes smaller than me. Now, it didn't occur to me that you could go out and buy clothes in Thailand for literally nothing. I just borrowed his pants and his shirts and his shorts, which he didn't want back in the end. So that stayed with me. So when I do a job abroad, so I'll take 2 projectors, 2 sets of pens, 2 sets of paints, 2 sets of everything, just in case. And when I carry one on and the other one will be in the hold. So for me, if I lose one, I still got the other one. And that's the way I think about it. And guess what? I've never lost anything yet. But yeah, I love the whole travel aspect because it's not like doing a mural in London. If I'm doing a mural in London and I say it's going to take 5 days, if something happens, I can just go back maybe the week after and finish off. If I'm in San Francisco and I say it's going to take 8 days, then it has to take 8 days. Because I can't extend it because it's going to cost too much money. So I do this thing which is panic inking on my first day. Like I said, I'm paranoid. So I do this thing called panic inking where I will just blow out maybe a third of the mural on the first day and then just relax for the rest of the time that I'm there. It just puts my mind at ease. I wish I could get an Uber to the bottom of the plane, but it's just not in my nature.
Good old Helen.
Good old Helen.
Yeah. and you mentioned that when you travel, you create these bespoke travel diaries, which are illustrations of your day, kind of like the Corona diaries condensed into small books of your travels. And I know that you've took an extended break recently to Malaysia at the end of last year. I'd love to hear a little bit about that trip and how maybe that's inspired your work creatively coming back from there.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm quite paranoid. I like everything in order. My wife is the opposite. She is much more relaxed than I am. And she is slowly teaching me that I need to let go of things and see what happens. So we went to Malaysia for just under a month, and we we kind of booked the first week, and then we didn't book anything else. And we had no plans. We just decided what to do one day to the next. And I'm getting to like that a lot more. I'm getting to like the fact that life is all about experiences, and you'll always have somewhere to sleep and you'll always have somewhere to go. And people are generally super nice and super friendly. And the food in Malaysia is amazing as well. And it's very cheap. So Malaysia was amazing. It taught me a lot about myself, about letting go, what's important, and people. And I did start a new project when I was away to do with painting everyday people. So I'm going out and capturing people that I see every day outside on the street who stand out. So I'm painting these people. They're real people, but I'm changing them slightly. But it's all to do with storytelling and how we see people, but we don't really know what their background is. We make assumptions about who they are by the way that they look. So I'm also writing a story to do with each person. Now, these stories are completely made up, and some of them are just wacky, some of them are touching, but it's to make you stop and think, don't ever judge a book by its cover. And these are little mini books. They're one piece of art, one person, one story, all in one. And I'm trying to do one a day.
And what do you plan to do with the project when you're finished?
That's a good question. I guess a lot of the time, especially with social media kind of influences us to make money from what we're doing. There's a lot of monetary gain in everything at the moment. And for me, this is not about that. I'd love to do an exhibition at the end or halfway through. I've actually got doing an open house in May. If you're in Peckham, come see, and I will display all the ones that I've done up to date. But it'd be amazing to have 365 portraits with 365 stories attached that you could just look at, read, look at the character and understand who they are just by the stories.
One of the things I wanted to touch on, which probably isn't quite so well known, is your kind of approach to your work in being mindful for sustainability. So what I like about this portrait series is you're using discarded carton or cardboard from greengrocers or something as the basis for these portraits. I'm right in saying that, aren't I?
Yeah, everything's painted onto cardboard.
Yeah. And with your pens as well, when you're doing murals, you're using a really kind of sustainable, refillable pen.
Yep. People ask me how many pens I go through, and in 14 years, I've still got the same pens. I refill them using water-based ink. So there's no chemicals, no toxins, no smells. All I do is change the nibs. But I'm one of these people that I get guilty if I throw anything away. So when I change the nibs literally have to be down to the last bit of fabric on the nib. It's just something that I'm, I guess, conscious of. Last year I did a mural for the BBC Experience, and that's hanging up in the BBC Experience at the moment. But that was actually painted using air ink, which is ink made from exhaust particles. So it's actually ink made from pollution. So I painted this entire mural to do with sustainability, the planet, and everything in pollution, which is crazy, but it makes you feel good about yourself, you know?
Hey there, real quick listeners. We are hard at work on a new mini-series aimed at demystifying the challenging corners of type and branding. We're calling it Behind the Font, and we need your help to make it happen. The first topic we're going to dive into is font licensing. Yes, the dreaded subject. But we want to hear your questions. So ask us anything on this topic, and we'll try to answer it on the podcast. You can send your questions in an email to podcast@monotype.com or message us on social. And if you're feeling super ambitious, record a voice memo on your phone and email it to us. We might even feature your voice on an upcoming episode. So keep your ears out for this new series coming later this spring.
It's just a couple of things I wanted to touch on at the end. So I wanted to talk about Northern Soul. So obviously you had a heritage of being into Vespers, being a scooter boy.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that's where you got your love of Northern Soul. But I just remember when you used to have your own studio quite regularly, you would broadcast yourself on Instagram having a little dance along to Northern Soul, and it was highly entertaining. So I just wanted to talk about your love of Northern Soul, if you want to talk about that, and talk about how music informs your work creatively.
Yeah, I love Northern Soul. I think it's something that I grew up with since I was my first scooter I got when I was 15. Found it in the back of someone's garden, bought it for £25, rode it around illegally, back in the day, because apparently you could. Don't do that, children, whoever's listening. And yeah, I got into Northern Soul. We used to go to scooter rallies. It's getting into ska nights. Northern Soul was a big musical influence for me. And even when I stopped being a scooter boy, I would still go to Northern Soul nights, to Stoke, the 100 Club, all over the place, really. Music plays a big part in who I am. I don't have a particular genre of music I listen to. I've been listening to my friend DJ Random, has got a show on Mixcloud, so I've been listening to him playing crazy, cool hip hop and mixing. And on the way home, I might listen to some soft jazz, some elevator music. I don't know. It depends what the mood takes me. But I don't actually listen to podcasts. It's one of those things. I get distracted by people talking. I'm not obviously being distracted by Graham at the moment, which is good because he's not a podcast, but this is a podcast. So this is getting confusing. But I probably will listen. No, I won't listen to this because that would be weird. Where am I going with this? I listen to music because it relaxes me, but it also introduces me to different artists that I've never discovered before as well.
And finally, what's next for you creatively?
So the portraits thing is very exciting for me. So I've got this thing. I love talking. I don't know if you've noticed.
Really?
Yeah. This is probably a 5-hour recording that's been narrowed down to about 45 minutes. So I do love doing talks and event talks. And I did one in Split in Croatia last year. I spent months working on my presentation and I loved it. It was so much fun. So I'd like to give back a bit more this year. I'm not close to finishing my career because I don't think I ever will, because I'm an artist and artists don't actually stop. But I definitely would like to give back more this year and maybe inspire not just the young generation that anything is possible, but also people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s that, I was 42 when I became an artist and I've never looked back. So yeah, talking, painting, I don't know, anything within reason that's legal-ish.
So I'm going to go back to the head of the conversation, to the child that was Vic Lee, the young, awkward kid, essentially, that transformed into the chatterbox, grown-up Vic Lee, and the successful artist. So I think it would be really interesting if you have any tips you might be able to share for budding creative entrepreneurs who may be lacking confidence at the moment to actually step out there and take the leap of faith to follow their passion. Do you have any kind of tips that you can share with those kind of people out there to inspire them to make that jump?
Yeah, we're all creative. We're all born as artists. Unfortunately, we grow up. So that's then kind of knocked out of us. And that could be anything. I'm not just talking about art. It could be, crikey, it could be music. If you want to go into accounting, that's creative. Numbers are creative. You could do anything really. But I suppose it's just having that passion, but also doing it for yourself. Don't do it for anyone else. Don't ever do anything for anyone else because you'll end up just copying what everybody else is doing. Just do something that you love doing and you would like to do for the rest of your life. I mean, for me, I actually went back to being a child This is the other thing. My middle bit, the 35 whatever years, that was just me being an adult. That was me being grown up and having responsibility. I've gone back to being a child. So I'm maybe reimagining myself as that kind of bullied, shy 14-year-old kid. But now I'm whatever age I am. Can't say at this moment in time. It's X-rated. But I'm doing what I did as a kid. But I've just got more confidence, and maybe I just don't take shit off people anymore. Am I allowed to say that?
You just did.
And maybe I don't take crap off anybody anymore, because I've realized that life is too short and there's just too much exciting stuff out there for somebody else to weigh you down with their negativity. So stay away from negative people, do what you want, enjoy life, and don't expect to make a lot of money out of it.
Thank you very much, Vic. It's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you again, and hopefully it's not too many years until we meet again.
Thank you, Graham. And hopefully, if I do see you in 20 years' time, I think we're still going to have our hair.
Well, I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
Either that or two toupees.
Exactly. It might not be our hair, but we'll definitely have some. So, no, it's been a pleasure. So glad you asked me to come and take part. And it's been an absolute pleasure to hang out with you.
If you'd like to learn more about Vic's work, follow him on Instagram at Vic Lee London. Since we chatted, I learned that Vic's working on a new book. It's kind of a memoir, and it's all about being scared. In his own words, if you're not scared, you're not living. So keep an eye out for that and get more details from his Instagram feed. Many thanks for listening today. If you've been enjoying our podcast, please rate us, subscribe to the show, and share us with your friends. Creative Characters is brought to you by Monotype. It's produced by Christopher Olin, Mia Sullivan, and Marie Tabares. We'll be back with more episodes soon.